The wind came first, a high, thin scream that Jesse Boone felt in his teeth. It was a sound that meant the mountains were closing for business. He pulled his hat low, sinking his chin into the damp wool of his collar. The air, already thin at this elevation, had turned sharp, driving ice needles into the cracked leather of his cheeks. He was high on the ridgeline, pushing a worn-out gray mare through snow that was deepening from ankle to shin inside of an hour. Jesse was running supplies: flour, salt pork, coffee, and 2 precious tins of quinine. A mining camp, tucked into a fold of the mountains so remote it barely qualified as a map dot, was counting on him. They were good men, mostly, and they paid in gold dust. But gold dust spent no better than gravel if you froze to death trying to deliver the goods. The mare stumbled, catching herself with a grunt. She was tired. Jesse was tired. They had been pushing hard since sunup, trying to beat the weather the gray sky had promised. The promise was broken. The world dissolved. It was no longer a mountain pass. It was just white. The blizzard hit not like a blanket, but like a wall of timber. The wind stopped screaming and began to roar. Snow drove sideways, stinging his eyes, erasing the trail he had been following, erasing the sun, erasing the very concept of direction. Jesse Boone knew this land. He had ridden these trails in the high shine of summer and the gray misery of autumn. But this was the wolf breath of winter, and it cared nothing for what he knew. The mare whinnied, a sound of pure panic, turning her back to the assault. "Easy, girl," Jesse muttered, his voice stolen by the gale. "Easy." He was off the trail. He knew it. To stay on the ridge was suicide. He had to go down, find cover, find anything other than this white violence. He pulled the mare's head, forcing her off the exposed rock and into the relative shadow of the timberline, plunging them into drifts that reached the saddle skirts. They fought the terrain for what felt like hours. He was no longer heading to the mining camp. He was just heading away from the wind. His hands, even in thick gloves, were numb blocks of wood. The medicine in his packs was worthless if the man carrying it was a frozen corpse. He was guiding the horse more by instinct than sight when she stopped dead, refusing to move. "What is it?" he shouted into the noise. He squinted, wiping ice from his eyelashes. Through the dizzying curtain of snow, a shape, a darker gray against the white, a line, too straight, man-made. He slid from the saddle, his legs sinking to the thigh. He pushed forward, breaking the trail, dragging the mare behind him. It was a cabin, or what was left of one. An old trail shelter, built against a granite shelf to save the trouble of a fourth wall. The roof had partially collapsed on one side, a dark, gaping hole sagging under the weight of seasons of snow. It was marked as abandoned on every map he had ever seen. A ruin. But the chimney, a crude stack of river rock, was not smoking. It was breathing, a faint, pale wisp of vapor, almost invisible. Curled from the stones and was instantly torn apart by the wind. Jesse's hand went to the butt of the Colt holstered on his hip. He was a supplier, not a gunman, but in the 1870s. The two professions often overlapped. He tied the mare to a low, snow-heavy branch, pulling the canvas tarp from his supplies and draping it over her. She'd live, for now. He moved to the door. It was rough-hewn plank, hanging crooked on one leather hinge. He drew the Colt, the metal biting cold against his palm, and kicked the door open. The darkness inside was thick, smelling of old smoke, damp earth, and something else, something sour, fear. "Show yourself," Jesse said. His voice was flat. The wind howled, pushing him inside, slamming the door shut behind him. For a moment, there was only blackness and the sound of the storm outside. Then his eyes adjusted. A hearth, cold stone, but in it a small pile of ashes. He touched them with a gloved finger. Warm, not hot, just warm. Someone was here, recently. He saw the other signs. A small shawl of knitted wool, dyed a faded blue, lay near the hearth. Beside it, a single woman's boot, the leather cracked and the sole worn through. "I have a repeating rifle on the horse," he lied. "And I don't mean you harm, just need shelter from the storm." Silence. Only the wind. He moved deeper into the single room. It was small. Crates were stacked in the far corner, near the stone wall where the chimney stood. A sound, a hitching breath. Jesse stopped. He did not raise the gun. He let it hang at his side. "Ma'am?" He took a step toward the crates. A figure lunged from the shadows. It was not a lunge of attack, but of pure, cornered animal terror. It was a woman. She was impossibly thin, her face hollowed out, leaving only the sharp angles of her cheekbones and two wide, frantic eyes. Her hair was a matted tangle of brown. Her dress was torn, the fabric so worn it looked like cobwebs. She was barefoot, on a floor of packed, freezing dirt. In her hand, she gripped a rusted skinning knife, holding it forward with both hands, her arms trembling so hard the blade danced in the gloom. "Leave," she whispered. The word was a dry rasp, barely audible. "Leave us, please, just go." Only then did Jesse see the second shape, hiding behind the woman's legs, clinging to the rags of her skirt, was a child, a little girl, maybe 5 years old, with the same haunted eyes and tangled hair. Jesse slowly, deliberately, raised his left hand. Palm open, he holstered the Colt with his right. The movement was slow, measured. "I won't hurt you," he said. The room was so cold he could see his breath. "I'm just a man, caught in the storm. My name is Jesse Boone." The woman's eyes darted from his face to the door, then back. She was calculating. She was weighing the cold that would kill her against the man who might. "Go," she repeated, but the knife dipped. "I can't," Jesse said simply. "We'll all freeze. Look." He unslung the heavy sack from his shoulder. "I have food, coffee, flour. I'll share it. I just need the shelter." He lowered the sack to the floor and pushed it gently across the dirt with his boot. "I don't want your food," she said. "The girl does," Jesse replied. The woman's gaze faltered. The child, silent as a shadow, had not taken her eyes off the sack. She had not blinked. Jesse took that as permission. He moved not toward them, but toward the door, taking off his hat and knocking the snow from it. He was a large man, and he tried to make himself small, keeping his back to them, showing he was no threat. He worked on the door, using his own knife to reseat the leather hinge and wedge a fallen roof timber against the frame to block the worst of the wind. The howling dropped to a moan. The cabin was instantly quieter, and somehow colder. He turned back. The woman had not moved. The child was still hidden. "We need a fire," Jesse said. "A real one." He gestured to the hearth. "You've been burning scraps. That won't last the night." He went back outside, bracing against the white hell, and returned with his saddlebags and 2 canvas-wrapped parcels. The quinine he stashed high and dry. The rest he opened. He had dry kindling in an oilcloth bag. He had matches. He built the fire slowly, giving her time to watch him. He was just a man building a fire. He struck the match. The flame caught, greedy, and light bloomed in the small space. He saw them clearly now. The woman, she couldn't be more than 20, maybe 21, but she looked older, worn down to the bone. Her skin was pale with a sickness to it. The child was just as thin, her face smudged with soot, and the girl was mute. She made no sound, not a whimper, not a cough. She just watched. Jesse boiled snow for coffee. The smell filled the cabin. He mixed flour with salt and water in a small tin, frying flat cakes on his skillet. He set a piece of jerky to soften by the fire. He pushed the skillet toward the corner. "Eat!" The woman stared at the food. The child's hand crept out from the skirt. A tiny, filthy hand. "Eat!" Jesse said again, softer this time. The woman collapsed, her legs giving way. She grabbed the skillet, pulling it into the shadows, and tore the hot bread, pushing it into the child's mouth, then her own. They ate like wolves, desperate and silent. Jesse drank his coffee and looked away, giving them the dignity of their hunger. He settled by the door, his bedroll at his back, leaving them the entire hearth. He would take the watch. "What's your name, ma'am?" he asked the darkness. A long silence. The woman's voice was rough from disuse. Clara. Clara. And the girl. She's just the girl. How long you been hiding here? Clara? The wind was the only answer for a time. When she finally spoke, her voice was a ghost. For seasons, a long time, since the snows melted, and now the snows are back. That was months. Surviving here? On what? Jesse fortified the cabin as best he could. He was trapped. The storm was a solid thing, a prison of white noise and biting cold that lasted through the night and into the next day. He and the inhabitants of the cabin were shipwrecked. That first night was the worst. He kept the fire low, conserving his wood. He dozed lightly, the Colt near his hand. He wasn't afraid of her, but of what she was running from. In the deepest part of the night, he heard it. The wind had died down to a low moan. The child was asleep, a small heap of rags. But from Clara, in the shadows, came a sound that chilled him more than the blizzard. She was crying in her sleep. Not a loud sobbing, but a choked, rhythmic gasping. A sound of absolute, bottomless despair, made by someone who had forgotten how to cry properly. It was the sound of a wound that never closed. Jesse lay awake, staring at the dark timbers of the roof, and did not move. The storm raged for 3 days. They were trapped in the gray twilight of the cabin. Jesse fell into a routine. He was a practical man. The shelter was failing. He spent the second day patching the roof. He used timber from the collapsed section, his hatchet ringing loud in the enclosed space. He worked slowly, ignoring the 2 pairs of eyes that followed his every move. He used spare rope from his pack to secure the timbers, packing the holes with snow and pine boughs. It was rough work, but it stopped the wind from screaming directly over their heads. He shared his food without comment. He made the portions equal 3 ways. He boiled the coffee, and this time, Clara accepted a cup. He watched her hands as she took it. They were scarred, her wrists especially. He saw pale, smooth skin circling her wrist, the mark of an old binding, a rope burn, worn deep, later, while she was reaching for a piece of wood for the fire. The torn sleeve of her dress gaped. He saw her back, even in the dim light. He saw the marks, a ladder of pale, raised lines against the grime of her skin. Old. He had seen marks like that on a mule whipped too hard. He said nothing. He just added the wood to the fire himself. Clara kept the girl close, always. The child never left her side, and never, ever made a sound. She was a doll, watching the world with an unsettling stillness. Clara herself flinched from touch. On the 3rd morning, Jesse passed her the tin of coffee. His fingers brushed hers. She recoiled as if he had struck her, spilling the hot liquid on the dirt floor. She stared at her hand, trembling, her breath catching. "Sorry," Jesse said, his voice low. "Didn't mean to startle you." Clara just wrapped her arms around herself, pulling back into the corner. He realized it was the first time they had touched. The barrier was broken later that day. A noise, a scratching from the crates. Jesse was instantly on his feet. He hated rats. They carried sickness and spoiled food. He grabbed a piece of stove wood. "Stay back," he said. He saw it, a large pack rat, its eyes glittering, darting from behind a crate toward his supplies. Jesse raised his voice, a low shout. Get out of here, you thieving bastard!" He hurled the wood. It struck the wall, missing the rat, which vanished into a crack in the foundation. A high-pitched, thin wail cut through the cabin. It wasn't the rat. It was the girl. Jesse turned. Clara was holding the child, who was rigid with terror, and the child's legs. A dark stain was spreading on the rags of her skirt. The sharp, acrid smell of urine filled the small space. The girl hadn't cried. She had wet herself. Not from the rat, from his voice, from the sudden violence of his raised arm and the loud shout. Clara's face was a mask of white shame. She pulled the child tight, hiding the girl's face in her shoulder, rocking her, whispering, "Hush, hush, it's all right. He's gone. Hush." Jesse stood frozen. He looked at his hand, still clenched. He looked at the girl, shaking uncontrollably. He looked at Clara, whose eyes were squeezed shut, as if trying to block out a memory. He knew. He didn't know the details. He didn't know the name or the place, but he knew this was not a woman who had simply run from a hard life. The scars, the flinch, the haunted, hollow eyes, the mute child who panicked at the sound of a man's raised voice. These were the marks of captivity. This woman and this child had not been living. They had been kept. They had escaped something monstrous. Jesse Boone let out a long, slow breath. He dropped the piece of wood. He walked back to his bedroll by the door, sat down, and picked up his empty coffee tin. He stared into it for a long time. Clara's frantic whispering subsided. The only sounds were the crackle of the fire and the low moan of the wind, which was finally, slowly, beginning to die. Jesse didn't push. He didn't ask the questions that were burning in his throat. He didn't ask who did this or how they got away. He just turned his attention back to the fire, poking the embers, adding another log. He was a barrier between them and the door. He was a wall between them and the fading storm. He would stay. The blizzard ended, but the world it left behind was a prison of white. The snow was piled in drifts as high as a man's chest, sealing the pass, erasing the trail, and locking the cabin in a profound, ringing silence. The mining camp was, for now, unreachable. Jesse Boone was trapped, not just by the weather, but by the two broken souls who shared the small, cold space. The days began to stack up. 4, 5, 6. Jesse built trust the only way he knew how, with routine. He was a man of practical actions, not of soothing words. He gave Clara space. He never crossed the invisible line he had drawn down the center of the dirt floor unless invited. He rose first, rebuilt the fire, and went out to check his snares. He brought back 2 rabbits on the 5th day. He skinned them outside, away from the girl's eyes, but she and Clara watched him cook the meat over the fire. It was the first real protein they had tasted in months. He made a thin, salty stew, and for the first time, he saw a flicker of life in the child's gaze. He still did not know her name. He had taken to calling her Little Bit in his own mind, but never aloud. She was a silent shadow, moving only when Clara moved, her eyes following Jesse with a watchfulness that broke his heart. He decided to teach her how to hold a cup. He had 2 tin cups, dented and blackened by 1,000 fires. He boiled snow, letting it cool, and poured a small amount of water into one. He set it on the floor near where the girl sat, huddled in her rags. "This is for you," Jesse said. His voice was low, careful not to carry the boom that had so terrified her. The girl looked at the cup, then at Clara. Clara, who was watching Jesse with a guarded intensity, gave a tiny nod. The girl reached out. Her small hand trembled so violently that Jesse felt a corresponding tremor in his own chest. It was the same tremor he saw in Clara. The girl's fingers fumbled, unable to grip the tin. She knocked it, spilling the water onto the packed dirt. She froze. Her eyes went wide, and her body became rigid with a terror so absolute it seemed to suck the air from the cabin. She looked at Jesse, expecting a blow, expecting the rage that had clearly governed her entire short life. Clara lunged forward, her voice a frantic whisper. It's fine. I'll clean it. It is fine," Jesse said, his voice calm but firm. Cutting through her panic, he retrieved the cup. "It's a dirt floor, ma'am. It'll dry." He knelt. This was a risk. He made himself small, getting down on one knee so he was not towering over them. He refilled the cup, only halfway this time. "Try again," he said to the girl. He held up his own cup. "Use both hands. See? Like this. Nice and steady." The girl stared at him. She looked at Clara, seeking permission again. Clara's face was a mask of confusion and fear, but she nodded. The girl reached out, this time with both hands, her tiny, filthy fingers wrapped around the tin. She lifted it. The cup shook, water sloshing over the rim, but she brought it to her lips. She took a small, sharp sip. Jesse nodded slowly. "Good. That's good." He did not praise her more. He simply stood, retreated to his side of the cabin, and went back to cleaning his rifle. He left the cup with her. A small measure of peace settled. On the 7th day, Jesse was sitting by the fire, mending a strap on his saddlebag. The only sound was the crackle of the flames. Then, another noise. It was faint, high, and thin. He thought at first it was the wind in the chimney. He stopped his work. He listened. It was the girl. She was in the corner, playing with the single boot Clara owned, and she was humming. It was not a tune. It was just a sound, a repetitive, tuneless note, the kind a child makes when they are lost in their own small world. It was the sound of a child forgetting to be afraid. Jesse looked up, his eyes meeting Clara's across the small space. Clara looked horrified. She looked as if the girl had just broken a fatal rule, as if the humming would call down a monster. She made a move to silence her. Jesse just smiled, a small, tired, genuine smile. He shook his head once, a tiny motion, and put a finger to his own lips. He turned back to his mending. Clara stared at him. She did not quiet the child. The humming continued, fragile and thin, but filling the cabin with something other than fear. That afternoon, Jesse took out his skinning knife. He found a piece of dry pine, part of the timber he'd used to patch the roof. He sat by the fire and began to carve. He was not an artist. His hands were made for reins and ropes, not for delicate work. But he knew the shape of a horse. He worked the wood for 2 days, in the quiet hours when the light was good. He carved away the rough parts, smoothed the edges with a piece of sandstone from the hearth, and worked it until no splinters remained. It was a simple thing. 4 legs, a pointed head, the suggestion of a tail. He finished it by the firelight on the 8th night. The girl was watching him, her eyes fixed on the small wooden object in his hands. He held it out to her. "For you, little bit, so you have something to hold on to." She did not move. She stared at the horse, then at him, then at Clara. Jesse did not force it. He set the small carving on the floor, in the space between them. "It's yours if you want it." He went back to his bedroll. He watched from the corner of his eye. It took her nearly 10 minutes, but then a small hand snaked out from the pile of rags. Her fingers closed around the toy. She pulled it back into the shadows. Jesse looked at Clara. Her face was changed. The hard, brittle lines of terror around her mouth had softened. A single tear tracked a clean path through the grime on her cheek. And then a muscle in her face hitched. An unfamiliar movement. The corner of her mouth lifted. It was not a full expression. It was the ghost of a smile, broken and full of pain. But it was there. It was the first time he had seen it. Jesse felt something in his own chest ease, like a rib shifting back into place. The smile, it seemed, had broken the dam. The next day, the silence in the cabin felt different. It was no longer empty. It was heavy, waiting. Jesse was sharpening his knife. Clara was sitting by the hearth, watching the flames. The girl was asleep, clutching the small wooden horse. "He did not like noise," Clara said, her voice a dry rasp. Jesse's hand stilled on the whetstone. He looked up. "The man," she clarified. She did not look at him. She spoke to the fire. "He hated it, when she cried, or when I hummed." Jesse did not speak. He did not ask. He had learned, in these days, that the only way to get her to talk was to be a better listener than the silence. He just waited. "I was 16, she whispered. The words came out hard, as if she were digging them from her own throat. "I was traveling. From back east. My family, they sent me." She pulled her knees to her chest, wrapping her thin arms around them. "I was on my way to California, to meet a suitor, a man my father arranged for me to marry." She said the words without any feeling. They said it was a good match, that he was wealthy. "What happened? Clara?" Jesse asked, his voice barely disturbing the air. "We were on the overland road, south of here. It was 2 summers ago," No, 3. I think he came out of the trees. He had a rifle. She was shaking now, a fine tremor that started in her hands and spread. My chaperone, Mrs. Gable, she tried to reason with him. He shot her, and the driver. He shot them both. I ran. She stopped, choking on the memory. He caught me. His horse. He caught me easily. He said I was pretty. He said I was his now. Jesse closed his eyes. He brought me up here, into these mountains, to a cabin. Not this one. Another one. Deeper in, miles from any trail. Her voice was flat, a recitation of facts. He kept me there for, I don't know, the seasons changed. I lost count. I forgot what a road looked like. Clara, Jesse said, the name a stone in his mouth. She is not mine. Clara suddenly choked out, the words tearing from her. She looked at the sleeping child, her face twisting in a mask of guilt and rage. I mean, she came from me, but she is not. She is not from love. She is his. She was born in that cabin, in that place. She broke. The sound he had heard in her sleep returned, but this time she was awake. It was a raw, dry sobbing that ripped through the cabin. He said if I ever left, he would find me. He said the world thought I was dead. He showed me a paper. It said I was lost to the wilderness. He said I belonged to him. She was rocking back and forth, her hands pulling at her matted hair. He hit her when she cried. When she was a baby, he would hit her until she learned not to make a sound. Jesse moved. He could not stand it. He crossed the small space in 2 strides and knelt in the dirt in front of her. He was a man of horses and trails, of freight and solitude. He did not know what to do with this kind of pain. She had her face buried in her hands. Clara. He reached out. He did not touch her back, which he knew was scarred. He did not touch her hair. He reached out and took her hand. His large, calloused, scarred hand closed over her small, trembling one. She stopped breathing. She went rigid. He expected the flinch. He expected her to recoil, to pull away, to scream. She did not. For a long second, she remained frozen. Then, slowly, agonizingly, her fingers uncurled from the fist she had made. She gripped his hand. She held onto it with the desperate, crushing strength of a woman hanging over a cliff. Jesse just knelt there. He said nothing. There was nothing to say. He just held her hand and listened to the sound of her world breaking apart, and felt, for the first time, that she had finally found a floor to land on. That night, the roles were reversed. Clara slept. After the confession, she had fallen into a deep, exhausted sleep, the kind that comes after a long fever breaks. She lay near the hearth, the child curled against her, the wooden horse clutched between them. Jesse did not sleep. He lay in his bedroll, which he had taken to using in the small, rickety loft space above the main room. It was drier, and it gave them the floor. He stared at the dark timbers of the roof. Just inches from his face, her story had unlocked his own. Guilt was a heavy key, and it fit the lock in his own chest. He closed his eyes, and the dim glow of the embers below became a different fire, a bigger fire. It was not a dream. It was a memory, sharp and sour. He was 19, younger, angrier, and running from a past he'd already started to build. He had fallen in with a crew. They called themselves the Slade brothers, though none of them were brothers. And Slade was not their name. They were fast, reckless, and cruel. Jesse told himself he was just riding with them for the pay, just holding the horses. They were supposed to hit a bank wagon, but the wagon was late, and they were drunk and angry. They hit a homestead instead, a small ranch tucked in a valley that the Slades claimed owed them money. Jesse was holding the horses. He stayed back by the cottonwoods, just like they told him. He told himself he was not part of it. He was just holding the horses. Then the screaming started, a woman's scream, then a man's, and the fire. The house went up like dry kindling. He remembered the smell. burning pine, and burning. Something else, something that turned his stomach. A woman had run out the front door, her nightdress on fire. One of the Slades had laughed and shot her. She fell on the porch. Jesse had turned his horse. He had thrown up in the bushes, and then he had ridden. He didn't stop until his horse foundered and collapsed. He never looked back. He heard later, in a saloon 2 territories over, a family, man, wife, 2 children, all dead, burned in the house. He had ridden with them. He had held their horses. His hands were just as bloody as theirs. Jesse woke with a jolt, his hand gripping the butt of his Colt. The cabin was dark. The fire was low. His heart was hammering against his ribs, and a cold sweat covered his body. He looked down from the loft. In the faint orange glow of the embers, he saw Clara. She was awake. She was watching him. "A bad dream?" she whispered. Jesse's throat was tight. He could only nod. He wiped the sweat from his face with a shaking hand. He was no better than the man who took her. He was just a different kind of monster. He was the kind that ran away. The storm that had buried them had aftershocks. The wind returned 2 nights later. It was not the white fury of the blizzard, but a high, thin, grieving sound that moaned over the chimney stone and rattled the patches in the roof. Jesse lay in the loft, listening to it, his own ghosts swirling with the noise. He heard a scratching sound from below. The ladder. He tensed. "Clara?" Her voice was small, barely audible over the wind. "Jesse?" He sat up, his head nearly brushing the roof beams. "What is it? Are you all right?" He heard her climb. He saw her shape appear in the loft opening. She was trembling, pulling her thin blanket around her. I'm afraid," she whispered. "The storm?" he asked. Just afraid." Her voice broke. "Afraid of sleeping? Alone? In the dark? It sounds like he's walking outside." Jesse understood. The nightmares. The memories. The dark was not a comfort. It was a threat. "Come up," he said, his voice rough. "It's warmer up here anyway." She crawled onto the loft platform. The space was tiny, barely big enough for his bedroll and his saddle. She lay down a few feet from him, curling into a tight ball, her blanket pulled over her head. The wind hit the cabin with a sudden, violent gust. The whole structure groaned. Clara let out a small, choked sound and moved. She scrambled across the rough planks, crawling to his side. She did not touch him. She just lay beside his bedroll, curled as tight as a fist, shaking. "I'm sorry," she whispered from under the blanket. I cannot be alone." Jesse lay on his back, staring at the roof. He could feel the heat radiating from her. He could smell the wood smoke in her hair, and underneath that, the sour smell of fear. His body was acutely aware of hers. It had been years since he had been this close to a woman. A deep, aching loneliness rose in him. A desire so sharp and sudden it made him feel sick with shame. This was not a woman. This was a refugee. This was a soul he was guarding. He fought himself. He fought the loneliness. He fought the memory of the fire and the guilt that told him he deserved no comfort. He turned on his side, facing her. She flinched, even under the blanket. He took his own bedroll, the thick wool one, and gently unfolded it, draping it over her. "You are safe," he whispered. She was still shaking. He did the only thing he could think to do. He laid his arm over her, not pulling her close, not holding her, just resting his arm over her side. A weight, a barrier, a shield against the night. She stilled. The trembling eased. "I won't hurt you, Clara," he whispered into the darkness. "I swear on my life, I will not ever hurt you. You sleep now." She let out a long, shuddering breath, a sound of surrender. She did not sleep. Neither did he. But they lay there, inches apart, his arm a heavy, warm line across her back. They lay there for hours, 2 broken people in a broken cabin, and held the darkness at bay. Morning came, pale and gray. The wind was gone. Jesse woke first. He had dozed, finally, toward dawn. His arm was still across her. She was asleep, her face relaxed in a way he had not yet seen. In sleep. She looked young, almost a girl again. He moved his arm, slow and careful not to wake her. He climbed down the ladder, his muscles stiff. He rebuilt the fire. He put the tin pot on to boil for coffee. The small, domestic act felt strangely normal. He heard her climb down the ladder. He turned. She was standing there, by the ladder, her hair a wild tangle, his thick wool blanket clutched in her hands. The silence in the cabin was thick, charged and awkward. "Coffee's on," he said, his voice gruff. She did not go to the fire. She walked toward him. She stopped just in front of him, so close he could see the gray flecks in her dark eyes. She looked at his face, at his beard-stubbled jaw, at his mouth. "Jesse," she whispered. And then she rose up on her bare toes, put her free hand on his chest, and kissed him. It was not a practiced kiss. It was not a kiss of passion or seduction. It was a kiss of profound, desperate gratitude. Her lips were chapped and soft, and they pressed against his for only a second. It was a thank you. It was a question. It was the first human touch she had chosen to give in years. Jesse stood like a man carved from stone. He did not respond. He did not breathe. She pulled back. Her eyes widened. The gratitude vanished, replaced instantly by a familiar, crushing shame. I am sorry," she stammered, backing away from him. "I should not have. I'm sorry." She turned, grabbing the empty water bucket, and fled the cabin, pushing the door open and plunging out into the snow. Barefoot? "Clara!" Jesse yelled. He grabbed her one good boot and his own, shoving his feet into them, and ran after her. He found her 20 yards from the cabin, standing stock still. The bucket was dropped at her feet. She was staring at the ground, shaking. "Clara, you'll freeze! What is it?" He knelt, pushing the boot onto her frozen foot. "It's all right. You did nothing wrong. It's all right." "No," she said, her voice sharp and new. She pointed. "Look." Jesse stopped. He looked where she was pointing. His stomach dropped into his boots. There, in the fresh, untouched snow that had fallen lightly overnight, was a line of boot tracks. They were not his. They were not Clara's. They were large, deep, and made by a heavy man wearing worn-out cavalry boots. Someone had walked near the cabin. They had stood in the cover of the trees, not 30 feet away, and they had watched the shelter. The tracks were fresh, made in the last hour, while they slept. Fear, cold and sharp as an icicle, returned. The fragile, tentative peace of the morning shattered into 1,000 pieces. Jesse stood up, his hand dropping, pulling the Colt from its holster. He scanned the silent, snow-laden trees. "Get the girl," he said, his voice a low command. "Get back inside. Bar the door. Now!" The cabin, which had been a shelter, was now a trap. The silence of the morning, once a relief from the storm, was now thick with menace. The boot tracks were a scar on the new snow. A violation. They were deep, left by a heavy man, and the stride was confident. This was not a lost traveler. This was a man who knew exactly where he was. Jesse moved with a coiled efficiency. He kicked the door shut, ramming the timber wedge back into place. "Stay away from the window," he said. His voice was quiet, stripped of all warmth. Clara had backed into the corner, pulling the girl against her, her hand covering the child's mouth as if to silence a scream that hadn't even happened. Her face was a mask of waxy, bloodless terror. Jesse grabbed his rifle. He checked the load. He had his Colt, and he had the rifle. He had 12 rounds for the pistol, and maybe 30 for the rifle. It was not a war, but it was enough to make a bloody argument. He went back outside, moving in a low crouch, using the cabin as cover. He circled the small clearing. The tracks came from the north, from the high timber. The man had stood behind a thicket of pine for a long time. The snow there was packed down. He had watched them. He had watched the chimney for smoke. He had waited, perhaps until Jesse emerged, and then he had retreated, his tracks heading back north. Up toward the pass, he was scouting. He would be back. Jesse spent the next hour turning the cabin into a fortress. He was no soldier, but he knew how to protect a claim. He used rope from his pack and a broken piece of crate timber to create a tripwire, a deadfall of heavy logs near the door, set to collapse if anyone stumbled through it in the dark. He found 2 tin cans left by the previous occupant and set them on the wood pile just outside the window, where they would rattle if disturbed. He reset his snares, not for rabbits, but for men, moving them closer to the cabin's perimeter. They would not stop a determined man, but they would make noise. They would give him warning. He returned to the dim interior, his face grim. The air was thick with the smell of old fear. Clara was rocking the girl, who was silent, her eyes wide, absorbing her mother's panic. "He's gone," Jesse said, settling by the door, his rifle across his lap. "For now. He'll be back," Clara whispered. She was not looking at him. She was staring at the door, her eyes fixed on the timber wedge. "He knows I'm here." "Who is he?" "Clara, the man who took you." She shook her head, a short, violent motion. "No, not him. He never leaves his valley. He sends them." "Them?" "His men, friends of his family. They check on me. They bring supplies. They make sure I'm still contained." Her voice cracked on the last word. Jesse felt a chill that had nothing to do with the snow. "He sends men? You've been here for 3 years, and you're still a prisoner." "I ran," she said, her voice rising, becoming thin and frantic. "I took her. I ran when he was gone. Weeks ago, during the thaw. I thought I could make it to the lowlands, but the snows came. We found this place. I thought he would not look here." She took a gasping breath. "I was wrong. That was one of them. He recognized the signs. He's gone to get the others. Or he's gone to get him." Her eyes finally met Jesse's. They were black with a despair so deep it looked like madness. "You have to leave," she said. "I'm not leaving," Jesse said flatly. "You do not understand," she shrieked, the sudden volume making the girl jump. They will not just take me back. They will find you here. They will find a man here. They will take the girl. They will give her to him. And they will kill you. They will kill you for being here. And they will kill me for letting you stay." Jesse's blood ran cold. He had seen hard things, but this was a different kind of darkness. "Clara, we can fight them, or we can run. When the pass clears, I can get you to a marshal. You can tell them what he did." She let out a sound. It was not a laugh. It was a dry, broken bark of hysteria. "A marshal? You think a marshal matters to him? You think the law matters?" "The law matters if you make it," Jesse said, his voice hard. "Who is this man? Give me his name." She stared at him, her chest heaving. The cabin was silent, save for the sound of her ragged breathing. "His name," she whispered, the words seeming to tear her throat, "is Silas Croft." The name meant nothing to Jesse. It was just a name. And who is Silas Croft? He was nobody, just a man. A wealthy man from Sacramento, but his family, his uncle is Judge Abram Croft, the circuit judge. He is the law in this territory. He controls the marshals. He controls the courts. He controls everything. Jesse felt the floor drop out from under him. He had heard of Judge Croft. Every man in the territory had a hard, unbending man who had built his reputation on hanging rustlers and clearing out the road agents. A man of immense power. And this Silas was his nephew, untouchable. Jesse looked at the small, mute girl, clutching her wooden horse. He looked at Clara, a woman presumed dead by the world. He finally understood. This was not a rescue. It could never be a rescue. Clara was not a missing person. She was a secret. She was a scandal. And the girl was not just the child of a monster. She was the child of a Croft. She was living, breathing evidence of Silas's depravity. An heir, perhaps, to a fortune and a name that would be ruined by her very existence. "They're not just trying to keep you prisoner," Jesse said, the pieces clicking into place. They're trying to erase you." "Yes," Clara sobbed. "And now they will erase you, too." She scrambled to her feet. The last vestiges of her sanity seemed to be cracking. She began grabbing her few, pathetic belongings, the single boot, the torn shawl, a small tin she kept herbs in. "We have to go, now. We have to go into the snow. It is better to freeze. It is better than—" She could not finish. She was stuffing the items into a rotting burlap sack. "We have to run." Jesse stood up. He crossed the cabin and put his hands on her shoulders. She was trembling so hard. It was like holding a bird that was dying of cold. "Clara, stop." "No, I will not stop. I will not let him find her." "Clara." He gave her a small, firm shake. "Look at me." She fought him for a moment, her eyes wild, refusing to focus. "Look at me," he commanded, his voice low and insistent. Her eyes finally met his. "You cannot run anymore," he said. "You will not survive out there. The girl will not survive. You are done running." "What else is there?" she cried, tears streaming down her hollow cheeks. "It is all I have known how to do. You will stay here, with me. We will wait. We will see what comes, and we will face it." "He will kill you," she whispered, the fight going out of her, replaced by a terrible, final grief. "Maybe," Jesse said. "But you are not just a secret, Clara. You are not just something to be erased. You are a person. She is a person." He gripped her shoulders, forcing her to feel the truth of his words. "You matter. You matter now." She stared at him, her mouth open, the words seeming to hang in the air between them. You matter, a concept so foreign, so impossible. It seemed to have no meaning. She collapsed against him, her legs giving way. He caught her, holding her up as the sobs tore through her, the burlap sack falling to the dirt floor. He held her, his hand on the back of her head, her face buried in the rough wool of his shirt. He stood there, a living wall between her and the door, his rifle leaning against the wall, and his mind racing. He was no longer a man running supplies. He was a man standing his ground. The day passed in a state of suspended terror. Every gust of wind was the sound of approaching hoofbeats. Every crackle of the fire was the snap of a twig under a heavy boot. Jesse kept watch. He sat by the door, his eyes on the tree line, his rifle resting on his knees. Clara stayed in the corner with the child, whispering to her. Though the girl made no sound, they were a tableau of fear, waiting for the end. Night fell. It came on heavy and absolute, a suffocating darkness that pressed in on the small cabin. Jesse built up the fire, but the light only seemed to make the shadows in the corners deeper, more threatening. He ate his share of the jerky, his jaw tight. He made Clara eat. She chewed the tough meat without tasting it, her eyes never leaving the door. He knew they could not go on like this. The fear would break them before Silas Croft ever could. He sent Clara and the girl to the loft. "It's safer, away from the door." She did not argue. She climbed up, pulling the child with her, and they huddled in the dark space, two small shapes in the gloom. Jesse sat below, his back against the wall, the rifle in his lap. He stared at the fire, listening. The cabin was utterly silent. The wind had died. The world was holding its breath. He must have dozed, though he had not meant to. He woke with a start, his hand clamping on the rifle stock. Nothing, just the low, red pulse of the embers. He heard a sound, a single, soft scrape on the ladder. His head snapped up. Clara was climbing down. She was not in a panic. She moved slowly, deliberately, her bare feet silent on the wooden rungs. She was wrapped in the ragged blanket. She reached the floor. She did not go to the fire. She did not go to the window. She walked to him. She stood before him, a silhouette against the glowing embers. "Clara?" he whispered, his voice thick with sleep and tension. "What is it? Did you hear something?" "No," she said. Her voice was not the frantic, thin sound of the morning. It was low, and it was rough with a different kind of tension. "It is quiet, too quiet." She knelt in the dirt in front of him. He was sitting against the wall, and she was so close that her knees almost touched his. I I cannot be up there, waiting, she whispered, waiting for him, thinking about what he will do. We're safe for tonight, Jesse said, though he did not fully believe it. No, she said. I am not safe. I have not been safe for 3 years. I have not. I am so cold. She was trembling. But it was not just fear. It was a deep, bone-deep tremor. A lifetime of terror finally coming to the surface. She reached out, her hand hesitant, and touched his face. Her fingers were icy, but they did not flinch when they made contact with his beard-stubbled skin. You said I mattered? She whispered. You do, he said, his voice hoarse. Silas, he made this. She touched her own body, her chest, her stomach, with a hand that was full of revulsion. He made this a thing for him, a place of pain. He just took. Jesse's heart was hammering. He did not know what to do. He was a man of action, but this was a different battlefield. She leaned in, her eyes dark, unreadable in the firelight. I am tired of being afraid. I am tired of being nothing but what he made me. She kissed him. It was not the soft, grateful kiss of the morning. It was a kiss of raw, profound desperation. It was angry and it was pleading. Her lips were chapped, and she kissed him with a force that was almost violent, her small, cold hand gripping his shirt. Jesse's body reacted instantly, a surge of heat and a deep, aching loneliness rising in him. He wanted, God help him, to pull her close, to answer her desperation with his own. But he did not. He put his hands on her upper arms, gently but firmly stopping her. Clara, his voice was ragged. Stop. You don't have to do this. I'm not him. I am not demanding this. She pulled back, her eyes filling with a new, sharper panic. She thought she had been rejected. She thought she had misunderstood. I know, she said, the words tumbling out. I know you are not. That is why he only ever took. I want to give. I want to choose. Her voice broke, and a sob caught in her throat. I want to feel something good. Please, Jesse, I want to feel something human, something good, just once. His resolve broke. The sheer, awful bravery of her request shattered his restraint. This was not desire. This was a reclamation. This was her planting a flag on the last piece of earth she had left to call her own. He did not answer with his own desperation. He yielded, as the outline said, with tenderness. He cupped her face in his large, rough hands. All right, Clara, he whispered. All right. He kissed her forehead, a long, simple pressure. He kissed her eyelids, her hollow cheeks, her jawline. He was unlearning her, unteaching her years of violence with a slowness that was agonizing. She was hesitant. She was terrified. She flinched when he moved too fast. Her body was a map of old terrors. He learned to read her, to feel the small, involuntary tightening of her muscles. And he would stop, hold still, and wait, until she relaxed again. He guided her, but he let her lead. It was her choice, her terms. Their first lovemaking was not a fire. It was the careful, painful, emotional tending of a near-dead ember. It was hesitant. It was intense in its fragility. It was two people, scarred and guilty and lost, finding an anchor in the dark. He held her, his hands gentle on the scarred skin of her back, and whispered her name, Clara, over and over, as if to remind her who she was. And when it was over, when they were lying in his bedroll by the dying fire, she did not look peaceful. She broke. She turned her face into his chest and she sobbed, not the choked, silent cries he had heard in her sleep, but a deep, wrenching, guttural grief. It was the sound of a dam that had held back 3 years of horror finally, catastrophically, breaking. He held her, his heart cracking. He thought he had broken her. He thought he had done the one thing he swore he would not. Clara, what is it? Did I hurt you? She shook her head, her face buried against his skin. Her voice was muffled, thick with tears. "No, no, you... What?" he pleaded. She pulled back, her face wet, her eyes searching his in the dim red light. "You will leave," she whispered. It was not an accusation. It was a statement of fact. "The snow, it will melt, the man will go away, and you will ride to the mining camp. You will deliver your supplies, and yous will leave. You will forget this. You will forget us." The fear of abandonment was, he realized, a terror far greater than Silas Croft. It was the one thing that could truly destroy her. He held her face, his thumbs wiping at her tears. "I am not leaving you," he said. His voice was raw, a vow torn from the deepest part of him. "Do you hear me? I don't know what comes next. I don't know if we run or if we fight, but I am not leaving you, or her." He sealed the promise. "Whatever it costs. Clara, I stay." She stared at him, searching his face for the lie. She found none. She collapsed against him again, her sobbing softening, and for the first time in 3 years, she slept. The morning brought a miracle. Jesse woke first, with Clara still asleep in his arms. He looked toward the small, dirty window. The light, it was different. It was not the flat, gray light of the storm. It was a sharp, brilliant, yellow-white. He gently extracted himself, covering her with the blanket, and went to the door. He pulled the timber wedge. The storm had ended. The world was remade. It was a silent, pristine, blinding white. The snow was deep, drifted high against the cabin, but the sky above was a painful, sharp blue. The air was cold, but still, the siege was broken. He felt a surge of hope so strong it almost made him dizzy. He turned back inside. Clara was awake, watching him, her face full of a quiet, fragile uncertainty. He smiled at her. A real smile. "We need firewood," he said. "The air is clear." They were low, dangerously low. "I'll go," he said. Clara stood. "Take her." Jesse paused. "Take the girl?" She has not been outside, really outside, I don't know, the sun. She has not seen the sun." It was the greatest act of trust Clara could offer. Jesse nodded. He found the girl, who was awake, watching them with her usual silence, clutching the small wooden horse. Jesse wrapped her in his own heavy wool blanket. Lifting her, she was light, like a bundle of sticks. "We'll be right back," he said to Clara. He stepped outside. The light was blinding. The girl buried her face in his shoulder, overwhelmed by the brightness. "It's all right, little bit," Jesse murmured. "It's just the sun." He waded through the drifts to the timberline, the girl on his hip. He found a low, dead branch and set her down in the snow, her small feet sinking. She stood there, wrapped in the blanket, her eyes wide, staring at the vast, white, shining world. Jesse found his hatchet and began to work on the branch. The girl watched him. Then, her gaze shifted. She looked past him, to where his mare, Gray, was tethered, patiently nibbling the bark from a sapling Jesse had cut down for her. The girl stared at the horse. She stared at the small, carved toy clutched in her mitten. She looked back at the real horse. Her mouth opened. A small, dry, rasping sound came out. A croak. She tried again, her face tight with effort. Horsey. The word was a tiny, broken thing. It was the first word Jesse had ever heard her speak. He froze. The hatchet hung in his hand. He turned, his heart stopping. What did you say?" The girl looked at him, her eyes wide, a flicker of the old fear. But then, she looked back at the mare, her small arm pointing. "Horsey," she said again. It was clearer this time, confident. "Horsey." Jesse dropped the hatchet. A grin so wide it cracked his face, split his beard. He let out a single sharp bark of a laugh. He scooped her up, blanket and all, and swung her around. "You said it! You said it! Little bit!" He ran back to the cabin. wading through the drifts, holding her high. "Clara! Clara! Come out! Come out here!" Clara burst from the cabin, her face white with terror, a rusted piece of metal in her hand. "What? What is it? Did you see him?" "No!" Jessie laughed, setting the girl down on her feet in front of her mother. "Listen, just listen. Go on. Little bit. Tell her. Tell your mama." The girl looked at Clara. She hid her face in the blanket for a second, then peeked out, pointing one small finger toward the mare. "Horsey," she said. Clara's hands flew to her mouth. A sound came out of her, a strangled gasp that was half a sob. Her knees buckled. Jessie was laughing, a deep, real laugh that echoed in the silent, snowy clearing. Clara looked at the girl. Then she looked at Jessie, his face alight with a joy she had never seen, and a strange, rusty sound came from her own throat. It was broken, it was rough, but it was a laugh. It was a fragile, beautiful, impossible moment. Later that day, the mood in the cabin was transformed. The fear was still there, a low hum beneath the floorboards. But the hope was brighter. The sound of the child's new, hesitant voice. She kept repeating the one word, "Horsey," as if testing it, had changed the air. Jessie was organizing his gear, repacking his supplies, a new sense of purpose in him. They would leave, not run, but leave. He would get them clear. Clara was tidying their small corner, folding the blankets. Her movements were less frantic, more deliberate. Jessie went to help her. Her bed was a pile of dry straw and old rags near the hearth. He reached down to help move the straw, to air it out. His fingers brushed something. It was not straw. It was paper. "It's nothing," Clara said, her voice suddenly tight. He pulled it out. It was a thick, folded piece of newspaper. It was yellowed, stained, and brittle. The Sacramento Union. It was dated from almost 2 years prior. He unfolded it. His eyes fell on a sketched portrait, a rendering of a young woman with dark hair and wide, sad eyes. It looked like her, or what she might have looked like before. The headline was large, "Missing, presumed dead in the Sierra." He read the text. Clara Alverton, 16 years of age, vanished from a private coach line. Daughter of Mr. and Mrs. Elias Alverton of San Francisco. Traveling to meet. He scanned the rest. And then he saw the final paragraph. A reward of $500 in gold coin has been offered by the Alverton family for any information leading to the safe return of their daughter, or for the confirmation of her remains. $500. Jessie stood up slowly, the paper in his hand. It was a fortune. It was more than he made in a year of running supplies. He looked at Clara. She was watching him, her face pale, her expression unreadable. She had known. She had known about the reward. She had known she was worth $500, dead or alive, and she had hidden it from him. The silence in the cabin was heavier than the snow outside. The newspaper, brittle and yellowed, felt like a judgment in Jessie's hand. $500. "You knew," he said. It was not a question. Clara did not look at him. She was watching the girl, who was tracing the outline of the wooden horse with one small, dirty finger. "I found it, in his cabin. Silas, he kept it. I think he liked to look at it, to remind himself that I was gone. This is a fortune. Clara, this is enough to get you clear, to get you anywhere." She finally looked at him, and her eyes were not just afraid. They were cold with a knowledge he did not possess. "Get me where, Jessie? Back to my father? Back to San Francisco?" She snatched the paper from his hand, her movement sudden and violent. "What do you think happens when I walk back into my father's house? Presumed dead, returned from the wilderness, and with her," she gestured to the child. "They will not see their daughter. They will see a ruined woman. They will see shame. They will ask questions. Where were you? Who was he? Why did you not die?" Her voice was a bitter imitation of a judging world. "They will say I am soiled. They will say I should have fought harder. They will say I am unclean. The word hung in the air, ugly and sharp. And her? She whispered, her voice breaking. What about her? They will see his face in hers. They will call her a bastard. They will take her from me so fast I will not even be allowed to say goodbye. They will hide her in an orphanage, or worse, they will give her back to the Crofts. A dirty secret to be buried. This reward, this $500. It is not for my return. It is for my silence. She threw the paper into the fire. It curled, blackened, and vanished. I am safer dead. We are safer dead. Jesse watched the last of the paper turn to white ash. He had faced men with guns. He had faced blizzards and starvation. He had never faced this. This was a wall he could not climb, a canyon he could not cross. There is another way, he said, his voice low. The law. She let out a single, harsh laugh. The law is Judge Croft. Not all of it. I know a man, a federal marshal, Abe Willard. He is based out of Carson City. He is not a local man. He is hard, and he answers to no one but the government. He does not like circuit judges. If we can get to him, if you tell him— No, she said. The word was final. No marshals, no judges, no men in black coats. You do not understand. The law is a building where they sign the papers that destroy women like me. I will not put my life and her life in the hands of another stranger who carries a badge. We run. That is the only way. He saw the iron in her. It was a terrible, unbending thing, forged in 3 years of horror. He had offered her justice, and she had seen only another trap. He nodded slowly. All right. No, Marshal. We run. But he did not believe it. That night, while she and the girl slept in the loft, a fragile peace between them, Jesse stayed by the fire. He pulled his supply ledger from his pack. In the back, there were 2 blank pages. He tore one out. He found the stub of a pencil. His hands, thick and calloused, were clumsy with the small tool. His writing was rough, barely legible. He addressed it to a man named Elias Thorne, a freight agent in Silver Creek, the last real town before the pass. A man Jesse had known for 10 years. A man who kept his mouth shut. Elias, I am in trouble. The deep kind. I found the girl from the papers. Clara Alverton. She is alive. She has a child. She was held by Silas Croft, the judge's nephew. She is in terrible danger. The Crofts are hunting her. I am taking her and the child east, over the mountains. I do not know where we will end up. If you see Federal Marshal Abe Willard, tell him Jesse Boone said to look into Silas Croft. Tell him the girl is alive and he is trying to bury his secret. Tell him to start digging. He signed his name. He folded the small paper, over and over, until it was a tiny, hard square. He pulled off his left boot and tucked the letter deep into the lining, beneath his heel. He would find a way to send it. He had to. He was a practical man, and he knew Clara's hope and his rifle were not enough. They needed a miracle, or a marshal. This letter was the best he could do. They had 2 days of fragile peace. The sun was warm. The snow began to melt, running in small rivers down the mountainside. The pass was clearing. The air, once full of terror, was now full of the sound of the girl's one word, horsey. She said it to the mare. She said it to the wooden toy. She said it to Jesse. They needed meat. The last of the jerky was gone. The stew a memory. The rabbits were scarce. I have to hunt, Jesse said on the 3rd morning. The air was clear and cold. We need food if we're going to ride. I will not go far. I can track a deer up the North Canyon and be back by sundown. Clara's face tightened. The fragile peace vanished. Do not go. We have to eat, he said gently. And the horses need to graze where the snow has melted. I will be quick. You have the Colt. He had shown her how to use it, how to load it, how to cock the hammer, how to aim. Her hands were small, but steady. He gave her the pistol. Keep the door barred. Do not open it for any reason. Do not go outside. I will give a whistle when I return. 3 notes, like a canyon wren. If you do not hear that, You do not open this door." She nodded, her hand gripping the gun. He kissed her. It was a new, strange, domestic thing. It tasted of coffee and fear. "I'll be back." He left. Clara barred the door. She sat with the girl, trying to teach her another word. Bird. Fire. But the girl just smiled and clutched her horse. The hours passed. The sun moved across the small, dirty window. At midday, she heard it. A sound, not his whistle. A single, heavy knock on the door. Clara froze. The girl, sensing the change, went utterly silent. "Hello?" a voice called out. It was a man's voice, gravelly and deep. "I see the smoke. I'm a traveler, lost my pack horse. Just looking for a little coffee, if you can spare it." Clara's heart hammered. She crept to the door, the Colt heavy in her hand. She said nothing. "Ma'am, I know someone's in there. I don't mean any harm." Silence. She heard the man sigh. Then, the crunch of boots in the snow. He was walking around the cabin. He was looking at the window. "I'm looking for a man," the voice called out, louder this time, right outside the window. "Jesse Boone. He's a supply runner. Seen him come this way." Clara's blood turned to ice. He is not here," she whispered, her voice dry. A low, unpleasant chuckle. "So there is someone in there. Look, lady, I don't want trouble. I'm just here for the runaway. We have nothing." "Oh, I think you do." She heard a scraping sound. "I think you're Clara Alverton, and I think you're my $500. Clara raised the pistol, aiming it at the door. "Go away! I have a gun!" "I'm sure you do." The scraping at the window stopped. Then, a sudden, heavy slam against the door. The timber bar groaned. "I'm a patient man. I can wait for Boone to come back. Or, I can come in." Another slam. Harder this time. The door shuddered. He was going to break it down. Clara backed away, her hands shaking so hard she could barely hold the gun. She pulled the girl behind her, toward the hearth. "Hide!" she hissed. "Hide behind the crates!" The girl scrambled into the shadows. A third, massive crash. The timber wedge splintered. The door flew open. A man stood there, silhouetted against the bright snow. He was huge, dressed in a heavy buffalo coat. His face was covered in a thick, greasy beard, and his eyes were small and cold. He held a rifle in one hand. "There you are," he said, stepping inside. He smiled, showing brown, broken teeth. "The little runaway property. You've been a hard one to find. Your family wants you back." I am not property," Clara said, leveling the Colt at his chest. The man just laughed. "That's what the paper says. Runaway. Now, you give me that pistol before you hurt yourself." He took a step. Clara fired. The explosion was deafening. The cabin filled with sulphurous smoke. The bullet went wide, striking the stone of the chimney, sending chips of rock flying. The man's laughter stopped. His face went dark. "You stupid!" He lunged. He was faster than he looked. He grabbed her wrist, twisting it with brutal strength. Clara screamed. The gun clattered to the dirt floor. He hit her, an open-handed slap that sent her staggering back. He retrieved the Colt, tucking it into his belt. "Now, we do this the easy way." He looked around the dim cabin. His eyes settled on the dark corner. "And what's this? A little bonus prize." He started toward the crates, where the girl was hidden. "Come on out, little rat." "No!" Clara screamed. She looked around, frantic. Her eyes landed on the fire, on the long iron fire poker, its tip resting in the red-hot embers. The man reached the crates. "Come here," I said. "Leave her alone." He turned, annoyed. As he turned, Clara lunged. She snatched the poker from the fire. It was glowing a dull, angry red. She screamed, a sound that came from the bottom of her soul, a sound of 3 years of rage and terror, and she thrust it forward with all her strength. The man's eyes went wide. He tried to raise his rifle, but she was too fast. The red-hot iron hit him square in the gut, just below his ribs. It made a sickening wet sound, like water on a hot skillet. and a plume of greasy smoke erupted. The man let out a terrible, strangled cry. He looked down, his eyes wide with disbelief. At the iron bar embedded in his stomach, he smelled the stench of his own burned flesh. He tried to speak. A bubble of blood burst on his lips. He looked at Clara, his eyes no longer cold, just surprised. He fell. He hit the packed dirt floor with a heavy, final thud. Clara stood over him, panting, the poker still gripped in her hands. The girl was in the corner, her eyes wide, unblinking, clutching her wooden horse. Silent, Jesse heard the shot echo up the canyon. His heart stopped. He abandoned the deer he had been tracking. He ran, sliding down scree slopes, vaulting over fallen logs, plunging through the deep, wet snow. He ran until his lungs burned and his legs were numb. He burst into the clearing. The cabin door was splintered, hanging open. "Clara!" He gave his whistle, the 3 sharp notes. No answer. He raised his rifle and charged in. The scene hit him like a physical blow. The smell of gun smoke, blood, and burned meat. The huge man, lying in a pool of dark blood. And Clara, her back to the wall, her knuckles white on the iron poker, her face as pale as the snow. "Jesse," she whispered. He rushed to her. "Are you hurt?" He checked her, his hands running over her arms, her face. "No, he came in. He called me. Property. He went for the girl." Her voice was numb. I... Jesse looked at the man. He was dead. There was no question. Jesse knelt, pulling open the man's heavy coat. He found what he expected. A tin badge, Pinkerton, bounty enforcement, and a neatly folded copy of the same reward poster Clara had burned. "Damn him," Jesse said, standing up. "Damn them all." He looked at Clara, at the poker, at the dead man. He looked at the girl, who had not moved. "You did what you had to do," he said, his voice hard. "You protected her. You protected yourself." He went to Clara and gently took the poker from her hands. It was cold now. He set it by the hearth. He put his arms around her. She was stiff, frozen. Then she collapsed against him, her body seized by a violent, silent trembling. "We have to bury him," Jesse said after a long moment. "We have to do it now, before the ground freezes solid tonight." It was grim work. They dragged the body out of the cabin. Jesse found a spot behind the cabin, where the ground was softer, shielded by a granite overhang. He used his hatchet and a flat piece of shale to dig. It took 2 hours. The hole was shallow. They rolled the bounty hunter in. He had no name they knew, and they offered no prayer. They covered him with dirt and piled heavy stones on top, to keep the animals from digging him up. When it was done, they stood in the dusk, their breath pluming. They were bound by a new, dark secret. They were no longer just survivors. They were outlaws. Back inside, Jesse cleaned the floor. He scraped the blood-soaked dirt away, throwing it into the fire. "He worked for someone," Jesse said, his voice flat. "Pinkertons. They always work for someone. When he does not return, they will send another, then 2 more. They will not stop." He looked at Clara. The fragile hope of the last few days was gone, replaced by a hard reality. "We have to run. Now. Tonight. Not west. East. Over the mountains. Into Nevada. We can find a town. Change our names. We can just vanish." Clara was quiet for a long time, staring at the fire where the man's blood was blackening. "I will go with you," she said, her voice low. Jesse felt a wave of relief. "Good. We pack what we can. We take his horse and his supplies. We leave in 1 hour." "But first," she said, her voice so quiet he almost did not hear her, "we have to go somewhere else." "Clara, there is no time. More are coming." "We go to his cabin," she said. She looked at him, and her eyes were no longer afraid. They were burning with a cold, terrible light. "The place he kept me." "What? No, that is madness. That is the first place they will look." "He will not be there," she said, a strange certainty in her voice. "Silas is a coward. He is in Sacramento or San Francisco, drinking wine and pretending this never happened. But his place, It is still there. Why, Clara? Why go back? I cannot run, she whispered, her hands clenching into fists. I cannot run east or west or anywhere. I cannot be new. Not until I burn it. I want to burn it to the ground. I want to stand on the ashes. I want to bury the man who is her father. I want him gone. Then I can run. So, Jesse looked at her, at this woman who had survived 3 years of hell, who had just killed a man to protect her child. He saw that this was not a request. It was a necessity. She could not build a new life until she had performed an exorcism on the old one. All right, he said slowly. You know the way? I know every rock, she said, her voice full of poison. I know every tree. They rode out, leaving the trail cabin to the wind and the ghosts. Jesse on his mare, Clara on the bounty hunter's strong bay horse. Holding the girl in front of her, they took the dead man's rifle, his ammunition, and his food. Clara led them away from the pass, deeper into the dark timber of the mountains. The landscape grew harsher. They left the high snows and descended into deep, shadowed canyons where the snow had given way to mud and wet rock. They rode along narrow, treacherous ledges, a roaring river 1,000 feet below. They passed through a ghost town, its empty windows like eye sockets, the buildings slumping, defeated, into the earth. Rattlesnakes, woken by the thaw, buzzed at them from the rocks. Jesse said nothing. He just followed, watching her. She was no longer the trembling victim he had found. She was an iron-willed woman on a grim pilgrimage. On the second day, she stopped. They were in a box canyon, a natural dead end, a place no one would find by chance. In the center of the clearing was a ruin. He burned it, Clara whispered, her voice hollow. All the fire gone. It was not a cabin. It was a pile of charred timbers, a sagging chimney, a black scar on the land. Silas, in his cowardice, had tried to burn his own secret. Clara slid from the horse. She walked, as if in a trance, toward the wreckage. Jesse dismounted, lifting the girl down, and followed. Clara stopped at the edge of the foundation, at the remains of a threshold. This was it, the place, her prison, the girl's birthplace. He burned it, she repeated. He thought that was enough. She stepped into the center of the ruin, onto the wet, black ash. Her boots made no sound. She looked down at a specific spot. This was the bed. She sank to her knees. Her body began to tremble. This was not the strong woman who had killed the bounty hunter. This was the 16-year-old girl who had been taken. I tried, she whispered, her fingers digging into the cold soot. I tried to die here, after she was born. He left his knife. I had it. She choked on a sob, her whole body convulsing. But I could not. I was too weak, too afraid. I looked at her, at the baby, and I could not even do that. I could not even die. She collapsed forward, her face in the ashes, her hands clawing at the black, wet remains of her prison. She sobbed, a sound of grief so profound it seemed to pull the light from the sky. Jesse felt his own past, his own fire, his own guilt, rise up and choke him. He understood this, the desire to be gone, the failure of it. He walked into the ashes. He knelt beside her. He did not speak. He did not offer comfort. There was none to offer. He simply put his arms around her. He lifted her. He lifted her from the soot and the wreckage, from the grave she had been living in. He held her tight against his chest as she sobbed, her hands leaving black streaks on his shirt. He carried her out of the ruin, back into the clean air of the canyon, and set her down on a patch of dry grass, her back against a sun-warmed rock. They made camp there, in the shadow of the ruin. It was a haunted place, but it was also a finished one. The girl slept, clutching her horse, her face peaceful. The fire burned bright. Above them, the stars were sharp, cold, and clear. Clara had been silent for hours, just watching the flames. Jesse sat beside her, cleaning his rifle. She turned to him. Her face was streaked with soot and tears. making her look like a warrior. "He did not win," she said, her voice quiet. "No," Jesse said. "He did not." She reached out and touched his face. "In the cabin. That night, you were gentle. You were so careful. Like I was a piece of glass, like I would break." "I thought you might," he said, his voice rough. "I am not glass," she said. Her voice was fierce. "I am not. I am the fire poker. I am the woman who rode through that canyon. I am not broken." She kissed him. It was not the grateful peck of the morning. It was not the desperate, pleading kiss in the cabin. This was a kiss of fire and ash. It was defiant. It was a claim. It was the kiss of an equal. She pulled him down onto the blankets, under the cold, watchful stars. This time, she led. Her hands were not hesitant. They were sure. They were strong. She met his strength, his guilt, his own dark past. And she was not afraid of it. She was not asking to feel good. She was demanding to feel everything. She pulled his mouth back to hers, her breath hot in the cold night air, her eyes open and blazing in the starlight. "Don't be gentle," she whispered. The morning after, the canyon felt like a grave. The ashes of the cabin were a black, wet wound on the earth. Clara sat by the cold fire, the soot from the ruin still striping her face like war paint. She had not slept. She had watched the stars fade, her jaw set, her hands clasped around her knees. Jesse watched her. He had seen her broken. He had seen her afraid. He had seen her fierce. This new woman, the one who had emerged from the fire, was a stranger. She was cold, still, and absolute. "We should ride," he said, his voice low, kicking dirt onto the last embers. "We need to put miles behind us before they find that body at the cabin." Clara did not move. "I am not running east," she said. Jesse stopped. "Clara, there is no other way. We run east, we vanish. Nevada, Utah. We can get lost." "No." She finally looked at him. Her eyes were clear, the haunted, hunted look gone. In its place was an iron resolve that chilled him. "Running is just another kind of prison, a bigger one. I will not hide in the dark for the rest of my life. I am done hiding." "What are you saying?" "I am going to Silver Creek. I am going to see my father." Jessie stared at her as if she had lost her mind. "Silver Creek? That's your father's town. That's the last place on earth we should go. That's walking into the lion's mouth. He is my father," she said, as if it were a simple, unassailable fact. "He is a judge," Jesse countered, his voice rising with a frustration born of fear. "He is a man of position. Clara, you cannot just walk back in. Not like this." "Like what?" she challenged, her voice hard. Jesse scrubbed his hand over his face, struggling for the words. "Clara, you have to see this. You are not the girl who left. They won't see you. They'll see a story, a scandal." He hated himself for saying it, but she had to know. "They will call you ruined. They will whisper. They will point. And they will not accept." He gestured to the small girl, who was now awake, quietly playing with her wooden horse. Clara's face tightened. "What? They will not accept her?" "They'll call her a bastard," Jesse said, the word brutal in the clean morning air. "And they will take her from you. A judge, a man of his standing. He will not risk this. He will hide you, or he will hide her. It will not be the reunion you are imagining." "I am not imagining a reunion," Clara said, standing up. She was taller than he remembered, or perhaps she was just standing straighter. "I am not riding there for a welcome. I am riding there for justice. You told me the law could help. He is the law. He will listen. He has to. He is my father." Jesse saw the futility of arguing. The iron in her had been forged in Silas Croft's fire, and it would not bend. She had chosen. She had survived the wilderness. Now she thought she could survive civilization. He was not so sure. He had lived in the civilized world. He knew its rules were far crueler than those of the mountains. "All right," he said. His voice heavy. "We ride to Silver Creek, but we ride in wary. I will be right beside you. But you need to be ready. That town will try to tear you apart." "Let them try," she said. They rode for 2 days. They left the high, broken country, the canyons and the ashes, and descended into the foothills. The world changed. They saw wagon ruts, then fences. They passed a ranch, smoke curling from a chimney, and the sight of a woman hanging laundry on a line made Clara flinch, as if witnessing an alien act. The girl, bundled in Clara's arms on the bay horse, was silent, her eyes wide, taking in the vast, open world. She had never seen a fence, a road, or a wagon. Silver Creek was not a city. It was a raw, booming supply town, built of fresh-cut pine and ambition. The main street was a river of mud, lined with saloons, a bank, a land office, and 2 competing general stores. It was loud. Men shouted, wagons creaked, a blacksmith's hammer rang out, and a piano plinked out a joyless tune from the Golden Nugget Saloon. They rode down the center of the street. The town stopped. The man shouting about timber prices went quiet. The women window shopping at the mercantile froze. The prospectors loading a mule wagon simply stared. They saw a man, Jesse, hard-eyed and trail-worn, his hand resting on his pistol. And they saw a woman. She was a horror, dressed in rags, her face streaked with soot and tears, her matted hair hanging past her shoulders. She was riding a fine bay horse, a saddle-stamped brand of the Pinkerton Agency visible on its flank, and in her arms she held a small, silent child. The whispers began instantly, a ripple that spread from the saloon porch to the bank steps. "My God, look at her. Is it Alverton's girl? Can't be. She died, lost in the pass. Look at her face. It's her, but who's the child? Damaged goods. That's what that is." Jesse felt the stares like wasps. He saw the men's eyes, the mix of pity and of vulgar curiosity. He saw the women's eyes, sharper, colder, full of judgment. He looked at Clara. Her face was pale, but she did not look at the crowd. She did not look left or right. She stared straight ahead, at the largest building in town, the 2-story brick courthouse at the end of the street, a flag hanging limp from its pole. Jesse tied the horses to the rail. He lifted the girl down, and the child immediately clutched at Clara's leg. Clara took her hand. Jesse stood close behind them, a silent guard. She walked up the steps. She pushed open the heavy oak doors. The courtroom was packed. It smelled of stale tobacco, dust, and damp wool. A local rancher was arguing with a mining foreman about water rights. The room was hot, the air thick with the drone of legal arguments. At the front, on a high-backed wooden throne, sat a man in a black suit. He was gray-bearded, his face carved into lines of permanent authority. He looked severe, impatient, and absolute. "And I repeat, Your Honor," a lawyer was saying, "my client has senior rights to that water, established in 1868. Clara started walking. She walked down the center aisle. Her ragged boots made no sound on the wooden floor. The lawyer's voice faltered. He stopped. The rancher turned. The foreman turned. The entire courtroom, row by row, turned to look. The sound of a woman crying softly in the back row was the only noise. Judge Elias Alverton looked up, his face dark with annoyance at the interruption. "What is the meaning of this? This is a court of law. Bailiff." His voice died. He stared at the woman standing in the center of his world, this apparition of soot and rags. His eyes, the same dark gray as hers, widened. His hand, holding the gavel, began to tremble. "Papa!" Clara's voice was a dry rasp, but it carried in the dead silence. Gasps. A woman in the front row put a hand to her mouth. "It is her. It's Clara Alverton." The judge stood up. He was a large man, but he seemed to shrink. The blood drained from his face, leaving it a waxy, stunned white. He dropped the gavel. It hit the desk with a hollow clack, then fell to the floor. "Clara," he whispered. The name was a prayer, a question, a denial. It cannot be. He stumbled down from the dais, his black robes flapping. He moved like a man in a dream, his hands outstretched. He reached her. He touched her hair, her face, as if expecting her to dissolve. "You're alive," he choked out. "My girl, my God, you are alive." He pulled her into a convulsive embrace, his authority shattering, replaced by the raw grief of a father who had buried his child. He sobbed into her matted hair. "We thought you were dead. We searched for a year. We, my girl, my girl." Clara stood rigid in his arms, her eyes closed. Then he pulled back. He held her at arm's length, his eyes still wet. Took her in. The rags, the scars on her hands, the exhaustion, and then his gaze dropped. He saw the small child, clutching Clara's leg, staring at him with silent, terrified eyes. The judge froze. The warmth in his face died. The father vanished, and the judge returned. His face hardened, the lines of authority snapping back into place. He looked around, suddenly horribly aware of the dozens of silent, staring witnesses. "Clara," he whispered, his voice urgent, pulling her to the side, away from the center aisle. What is this? Who is this man?" He gestured at Jessie, who stood watchful by the door. "Who is this child?" "Papa," Clara said, her voice low, desperate for him to understand. "I was taken on the road 3 years ago. I was taken by Silas Croft." The judge's face went from white to red. "Hush! He kept me." Clara pushed on, the words tumbling out. "In the mountains, this is his child. Papa, this is my daughter." "Be silent," Judge Alverton hissed. His hand gripped her arm, his fingers biting in. "Not here. Do you know what you are saying? You are distraught. You are ill." He looked at the courtroom, his eyes full of a frantic, panicked energy. This is a private matter. My daughter, she has been through a terrible ordeal. She is not, well, I am not ill," Clara said. Her voice was flat. She was looking at his hand, gripping her arm. She felt the pressure, and she felt the truth. Jessie was right. She saw it all. He was not protecting her. He was protecting himself. He was protecting the name. He was protecting his courtroom. He was doing, in his own way, exactly what Silas Croft had done. He was silencing her. "For your own good, Clara," he said, his voice pleading. "You must not speak further. We will go to the house. Your mother. We will get you a bath. We will handle this." "Handle it?" Clara said. She pulled her arm from his grip. "You mean cover it up?" "That is enough," the judge thundered, his voice bouncing off the walls. "Bailiff!" "She's right. Judge," Jessie said. His voice was not loud, but it cut through the room. Judge Alverton wheeled on him. "Who are you? How dare you speak? Bailiff, remove this man." "He's the man who saved my life," Clara said, her voice ringing out. "His name is Jesse Boone, and I will not be silent. I was abducted by Silas Croft. He held me captive for 3 years. He fathered this child, and he is Judge Abram Croft's nephew." A collective, shuddering gasp filled the room. This was not just a scandal. This was a war. "This is an outrage!" Judge Alverton shouted, his face purple. This vagrant! He has poisoned you! Bailiff, arrest this man!" "I'd hold off on that, bailiff," the voice came from the back. A tall man in a plain, trail-dusted coat uncoiled himself from the back bench, where he had been watching the water rights case. He walked forward, his boot heels clicking. He was not a local. He flipped open his coat. A small, tin badge was pinned to his vest. "Federal Marshal Abe Willard. Been in town for 2 days. Judge, and I've been hearing the name Silas Croft quite a bit." The judge looked as if he had been shot. "Marshal, this is a family matter." "It stopped being a family matter," Willard said, his voice cold as a mountain stream, "when it involved abduction across state lines, and it stopped being a family matter when it became a pattern." Willard stopped in front of Clara. He looked at her, his eyes taking in the soot, the scars, The child? His gaze was not judgmental. It was assessing. Ma'am, my apologies. I've been investigating Croft for 6 months. 2 other girls vanished on the North Road. Their families were paid handsomely to call it a riding accident. We never had a witness. We never had anyone who survived. He looked from Clara to the judge, whose face had collapsed. Until now, your testimony, ma'am, just opened a federal case. The courtroom erupted. Judge Alverton, broken, stumbled back to his dais and collapsed into his chair. Clara stood in the center of the storm. Jessie at her side. Marshal Willard took them from the courthouse. The walk to the U.S. Hotel, where the marshal's office was only 100 yards. It felt like a mile. The courtroom had emptied onto the street. The news spread like wildfire. The town was watching. Clara heard the whispers. Look, that's her. Damaged, utterly damaged. And the child? A bastard. Shameful. Shameful? That pig Croft. They should hang him. She's brave, though. Walking in there, speaking up. Brave? She's ruined. No decent man will ever look at her. Her life is over. Clara felt Jessie's presence, a solid wall of heat beside her. He did not look at the crowd. He watched her. She held the girl's hand tighter. She felt the ashes on her face, the grit in her hair. She heard every word, and she held her head high. She was not a judge's daughter. She was not a lost girl. She was not a victim. She was a witness. The marshal's office was a small, quiet room at the back of the hotel. He gave the girl a piece of hardtack and a cup of water, and she sat on a cot, exhausted, clutching her horse. Now, ma'am, Willard said, sitting behind a desk. From the beginning. Clara talked. For an hour, she spoke. She told him everything. The abduction, the cabin, Silas, the men who visited, the birth of her child, the escape, the blizzard, the old trail cabin. As she was describing the second cabin, the one Jessie had found her in, the door to the office burst open. It was not the marshal's man, it was the local sheriff, a man named Bean, with a thick neck and a drooping mustache. He was a town man, loyal to the local powers, loyal to Judge Alverton. Marshal, Bean said, ignoring Clara. I'm here for him. He pointed at Jessie. Jessie, who had been standing by the window, turned. On what charge? Murder, Bean said, a look of triumph on his face. A rancher found a body up on the ridge, buried shallow, near that old collapsed trail cabin. Body's been identified, a Pinkerton agent out of Sacramento. We tracked his horse, the one the lady is riding. Clara's stomach dropped. He's under arrest, Bean said, pulling out handcuffs. Jessie looked at Willard. It was self-defense. That's what they all say. Bean sneered. It wasn't him, Clara screamed, leaping to her feet. The sudden shout made the girl cry out. A small, terrified sound. Clara, stay calm, Jessie said. No, she yelled at the sheriff. He is lying. That bounty hunter. He broke into our cabin. He called me runaway property. He hit me, and he went for my child. Jessie wasn't even there. He was hunting. Clara's face was wild. I killed him. I did it. I put a fire poker through his stomach. Sheriff Bean stopped. He looked at her, at this small, thin woman, and he let out a short, ugly laugh. A fire poker? You? A likely story. Ma'am, he's just trying to protect you, or you're trying to protect him. It don't matter. He's the man. He's the one who's responsible. Marshal, Jessie said, his voice low, cutting through Clara's protests. This is a local charge. They're trying to discredit her testimony. They're trying to lock up her witness. I see that. Boone, Willard said, standing. Sheriff, this man is a material witness in a federal investigation. He stays with me. He's a murder suspect in my county. Bean shot back. He goes in my jail, unless you want to start a war between the town and the feds. Marshal, you'll stand aside. Willard stared at Bean, his jaw tight. It was a fight he could not win. Not yet. Jessie nodded once to Willard. It's all right. Marshal, don't fight him. He looked at Clara. Her face was a mask of terror and disbelief. "It's all right," he said to her, his voice soft. You tell him the rest. You tell him everything. I'll be fine." He turned to the sheriff and held out his wrists. They spent the night apart. Marshal Willard paid for a room for Clara and the child at the boarding house across the street. It was a clean, small room, with a soft bed and a porcelain wash basin. Clara stared at it. After the dirt and ash, the clean white sheets looked like a new kind of prison. She washed her face, scrubbing at the soot, but she still felt dirty. Jessie was in the town jail. A single cell, cold stone, with a narrow cot and a reek of stale whiskey and despair. Clara put the girl to sleep in the soft bed, the first real bed of her life. Then she walked back across the dark, muddy street. The jailhouse was quiet. A single deputy sat asleep at a desk. Clara slipped inside. "Jessie?" she whispered at the bars. He was there, standing in the shadow. He moved into the faint moonlight coming through the window. "Clara, you should be sleeping. How can I?" she whispered, her hands gripping the cold iron bars. They'll hang you. This is my fault. I brought you here." "No," he said, his voice rough. "You did right. For the first time, you did right. You stood in the light. I've never been proud of anyone. Clara, but I'm proud of you." He reached through the bars, his fingers touching her cheek. "Willard will sort it. It was self-defense. Your testimony will prove it." "My testimony," she said, a bitter, broken sound. "My testimony got you in here. My father, he hates me. The town, they think I am." "I don't care what they think," he said. She pressed her face against the bars, her tears hot on the cold metal. "I should have run east, like you said. I should have just vanished. Then you'd still be hiding," he said. "This is better." He kissed her. Through the bars, it was a clumsy, painful, desperate kiss, tasting of iron and fear and a strange, defiant hope. She pulled back, her forehead resting against the metal, his fingers still tangled in her hair. "Jessie," she whispered, if we make it out of this, if Willard gets them to believe us, and if I'm not put away for what I did." "They won't," he said. "If we get out," she insisted, her voice raw and fierce. "I am not staying here. I am not my father's daughter. I am not Clara Alverton anymore. I'm just me. You'll take me and the girl. You'll take us wherever your horse goes." He gripped her hands through the bars, his knuckles white. "I will," he said. "Wherever my horse goes, I agree." The jail cell was a box of cold stone and iron shadows, but the air was warmer on the outside. Jessie Boone stood in the pale morning light of Silver Creek, his wrists raw from the cuffs, and breathed in. It was the first clean breath he had taken since Sheriff Bean had locked him away. Marshal Abe Willard stood beside him, a piece of paper in his hand. "Charges are dropped. Boone, your story and Miss Alverton's sworn testimony match. The bullet hole in the chimney, the angle of the wound, described by her, matches a man lunging, not a man shot from a distance. Self-defense. The Pinkerton was outside his jurisdiction, and acting on a runaway notice that was, by my definition, part of a federal conspiracy to conceal a crime. Bean's not happy, but he's a town dog, and this is a federal bone." Jessie just nodded, rubbing his wrists. His eyes were fixed on the boarding house across the street. Clara was standing on the porch, waiting. She was not the soot-streaked apparition from the day before. Someone, the boarding house owner perhaps, had given her a dress. It was a simple, gray wool, too large for her thin frame, but it was clean. Her hair was washed, combed, and tied back. She looked civilized, and, to Jessie, she looked more lost than she had in the cabin. She held the girl's hand. The child, whom Clara had started to call Anne, was also clean, her small face scrubbed, looking at the muddy street with wide, silent wonder. "She has to testify again," Willard said, folding the paper. This afternoon, Town Hall. Bean is calling it a coroner's inquest for the bounty hunter. But I'm making it a preliminary hearing on Croft. I'm taking over. The town's buzzing. They want blood. I'm gonna give them a warrant." "She's given enough," Jesse said, his voice low. "She's the only one who can," Willard replied, his voice not unkind. "It's her, or the memory of those other girls who never came back. She has to finish it." Jesse walked across the street, his boots sinking into the thick mud. Clara watched him come. She did not run to him. She just stood, her hand gripping Anne's, her knuckles white. He stopped in front of her. He looked at the clean dress, the combed hair. "You look," he started, but he had no words. "I feel like a doll," she whispered. "Dressed up for them, so they can look at me and whisper, 'You don't have to do this, Clara. We can still ride, right now.'" She shook her head. The iron he had seen in the canyon was still there, beneath the clean wool. "I killed a man, Jesse, and you were arrested for it. They need to hear why. The whole town. I am not damaged. I am not runaway property. I am a witness. I'll do it, then we go." The town hall was packed. It was a single, large room with a raised platform, smelling of unseasoned pine, wet wool, and human sweat. There was no order. Men stood in the back, along the walls. The women, in their dark dresses, sat in the pews, their faces grim and hungry for the story. Marshal Willard stood at the front, with Sheriff Bean sullenly beside him, a symbol of the town's reluctant surrender to federal power. Judge Elias Alverton sat in the front row, alone. His face was a mask of gray stone. He looked like a man who had aged 20 years in one day. "We are here," Marshal Willard began, his voice cutting through the murmurs, "to hear testimony regarding the death of a man known as Thomas Grote, a Pinkerton agent, and to hear evidence in the abduction and captivity of Miss Clara Alverton, and the subsequent flight of the suspect, Silas Croft." Clara walked to the front. Jessie sat in the second row, close enough to reach her if she fell. She stood alone, facing the town. "Ma'am," Willard said, his voice gentle, "please tell us what happened. Start with the man, Grote." Clara's voice was thin, but it did not tremble. "He came to the cabin. Jessie was gone. He broke the door. He called me. Property. He hit me. He tried to take my daughter, Anne." She said the name. It felt solid in her mouth. "I fired a warning. He did not stop. He went for her. I had the fire poker. In the embers. I stabbed him." A low, horrified murmur went through the crowd. The women's faces hardened. "And Silas Croft?" Willard prompted. Clara's gaze drifted to her father. He was staring at his hands, clasped in his lap. "He took me from the road," she said, her voice stronger now. "He killed my chaperone, Mrs. Gable. He kept me in a cabin for 3 years. He... She faltered, the words of her shame catching in her throat, the eyes of the town stripping her bare. "She is unwell. She is delirious." Judge Alverton shouted, leaping to his feet. "This is a fabrication! This man Boone! He has put these words in her mouth. She is not my daughter. My daughter died in the pass." He was desperate, a man burning his own house down to hide the rot. Clara stared at him, her face crumbling. The town was silent, watching the father deny the child. "She is not delirious." The voice came from the side aisle. It was a woman, plain, in a boarding house apron, her hands red and chapped. Sarah Bishop. She had been the one to give Clara the dress. She was trembling, but she walked forward. "Mrs. Bishop," the marshal said, surprised. "What is this?" "She is not delirious," Sarah said again, standing next to Clara, a small, solid rock. "And she is not the first." The room went dead silent. "My daughter?" Sarah Bishop said, her voice shaking but gaining strength. "My Emily. She was 17. She was traveling to Carson City to work for her aunt 5 years ago. She She never arrived. We thought Indians or a fever." She turned, her eyes burning, and pointed at Judge Alverton. A month later, Judge Abram Croft, Silas's uncle, he came to my boarding house. He brought condolences, and he brought $200 in gold. He said it was to help with our grief. My husband, he took it. He said it was charity. But I knew it was payment. She looked at Clara. "I saw Silas Croft in this town 2 summers ago. He was laughing. He had my daughter's eyes. And I said nothing. I kept the money." She began to sob. A raw, terrible sound. "But this girl, she has the courage I did not. She is telling the truth. Silas Croft took my Emily, and he took her, and God knows how many others." It was done. The town, which had been ready to call Clara a harlot, now had a new target. The whispers turned to a roar. "Croft! Murderer! Hang him!" Judge Alverton had collapsed, his face in his hands. The town's judgment, the thing he had feared most, had turned from his daughter and was now aimed like a cannon at the family he had tried to ally with. Marshal Willard raised his hand. "That is enough. I have what I need, based on the testimony of Miss Alverton and the corroboration of Mrs. Bishop. I am issuing a federal warrant for the arrest of Silas Croft on charges of abduction, murder, and whatever else we find when we start digging." A deputy stepped forward, handing him a telegram. Willard read it, his face tightening. "It seems," he said, his voice hard, "that a man matching Silas Croft's description boarded an eastbound train out of Reno 2 days ago. The very day Miss Alverton walked into that courthouse, he has fled." The room erupted, but Clara did not hear it. It was over. The warrant was out, but Silas was gone. It was a victory that felt exactly like a defeat. She walked out of the town hall, Jessie at her side. The crowd parted for her, their faces no longer hostile, but full of a pity that felt just as suffocating. That evening, they stood in the small boarding house room. Jessie had packed their few belongings, the bounty hunter's rifle, the food, the blankets. "He's gone, Jessie," Clara said, staring out the window at the town she had once belonged to. "They'll never find him." "Maybe not," Jessie said. "But you're free. Clara, you faced them. You won." "Won?" She turned. "My father, he looked at me like I was a stranger. This town. They will always see me as the broken girl from the mountains. This isn't freedom. It's just a better cage." She walked to him. "I want to go. Now. Tonight. I don't want to wait for a trial that will never happen. I don't want to see my father's face again." She touched his chest. "You made a promise. In the dark, through the bars. Wherever your horse goes." He covered her hand with his. "We leave tonight, but one last stop. You should see your mother." Clara's face tightened. She was not there. She did not come." "Go to the house," Jessie said, his voice gentle. "Just go, or you'll wonder for the rest of your life." The Alverton house was on a hill overlooking the town. It was large, white, and dark, a monument to a respectability that was now in ruins. Jessie waited at the gate with the horses and Anne. Clara walked up the stone path alone. She felt like a ghost. She knocked. The door opened a crack. It was her mother, Eleanor Alverton, a gray, trembling woman who looked like a bird trapped in a cage of silk and lace. Her eyes were red. "Clara," she whispered, her hand flying to her mouth. She looked past Clara, at the horses, at Jessie, at the child. "Mother, your father, he cannot, I did not come for him." Clara said. Eleanor Alverton opened the door. She looked at her daughter, this strong, strange woman who had come back from the dead. She stepped out onto the porch, pulling the door shut behind her. She was crying silently. I always knew," Eleanor whispered. "In my heart, I knew you were not dead. But he said we must accept it. It was easier for him." She reached out and touched Clara's clean hair. "You are so thin. You were brave. What you did, I am not. Her eyes drifted to the small girl, Anne, who was watching them from the safety of Jessie's side. She is... Yes, Clara said. The mother fumbled in the pocket of her dress. She pulled out a small, simple thing, a length of blue satin ribbon. I kept this, she whispered. It was yours, from your first bonnet. She walked down the steps, her legs shaking. Jessie watched, his hand on his pistol, but his face was soft. Eleanor knelt in the mud in front of the child. Hello, she whispered. Anne stared at her. Eleanor gently, her hands trembling, tied the blue ribbon in the girl's fine, dark hair. It was a stark, beautiful color against the wildness. She looks like you, Eleanor said, her voice thick with tears. She touched the child's cheek. You are still ours. No matter what they say, you are still ours. She stood. She looked at Jessie. A long, searching look. He nodded once. He understood. Eleanor Alverton turned back to Clara. She embraced her. A fierce, sudden hug. A lifetime of silent grief and regret poured into one moment. Go, she whispered in Clara's ear. Do not stay here. This place, it is full of ghosts. Go, be happy. She released her and fled back into the dark house. Clara stood on the path for a moment, the blue ribbon a flash of color in the twilight. She turned and walked back to Jessie. She did not look back. They rode north, not east, into the known territories, not west, back to the coast. They rode north into the high valleys, toward the spine of the mountains, where the maps were blank and the air was thin. After 2 days of hard riding, they passed the old trail cabin. It was just as they had left it, the door hanging open, the snow melting from its sagging roof. It looked small, dead, and quiet. A husk. Clara stopped her horse. Jessie stopped beside her. Do you want to? No, she said. It's just an old cabin. She nudged her horse, and they rode on, not looking back. They found their place a day later. It was a high meadow, a valley tucked into the arm of a mountain, shielded from the wind. A creek, full of snowmelt, ran through it. There was timber on the slopes, and the meadow grass was thick. From the mouth of the valley, they could see for 50 miles, a vista of sun-baked canyons and distant, snow-capped peaks. They dismounted. The air was clean. It was utterly silent, save for the sound of the creek and a hawk crying, high above. Anne, who had been growing bolder, slid from the saddle. She saw a small, brown bird land on a rock. Birdie, she said, her second word. She pointed. Clara watched her. She walked to a large, flat rock at the edge of the clearing and sat. The sun was warm on her face. She closed her eyes, breathing in the smell of pine and wet earth. Jessie came and stood beside her. It's good land, he said. Good water. We can build here. Clara opened her eyes. She looked out at the vast, empty, beautiful world. Jessie, she said, her voice quiet. This is the first place I've ever felt like a person again. Not a prisoner, not a witness, not a daughter, just a person. He sat beside her. Then this is where we build. They worked. The next weeks were not about survival. They were about building. It was the hardest work Jessie had ever known, and the best. He felled the trees, his axe ringing out in the silent valley. He was not a carpenter, but he was strong, and he was patient. He notched the logs, one by one. Clara worked beside him. She gathered stones from the creek bed. Her hands, which had been scarred by captivity, now growing calloused with purpose. She built the hearth, stone by stone. She mixed mud and grass to chink the logs, sealing them against the wind. They worked from sun up to sundown. They did not talk much. They worked as a team, 2 parts of a single machine, and learned new words. Tree, water, mama. The cabin rose. It was small, 1 room, like the prison. But it was not dark. Jessie had cut a wide window, facing south, and it flooded the space with light. The hearth was wide and drew well. It was solid. It was theirs. When the last roof timber was in place, Jessie took out his knife. He stood at the door. A simple, sturdy plank he had built from split pine. He began to carve. Clara came to stand beside him, wiping sweat and mud from her face. "What are you doing?" He was not an artist. The letters were rough, cut deep into the wood, but they were clear. He had carved a single word above the door: hope. That night, they sat inside their home. A fire burned in their hearth. The smell was not of old smoke and fear, but of new pine and roasting rabbit. Anne was asleep in a small bed Jessie had built, her small hand clutching the wooden horse, the blue ribbon tied to its mane. The cabin was warm. The wind was high on the ridge, but inside, it was still. Jessie sat on the floor, leaning against the wall, watching the flames. Clara sat beside him. She leaned her head on his shoulder. "It's a good word," she whispered. "It's a good cabin," he said. She turned, her face lit by the fire. The last few weeks of sun and hard work had put color in her cheeks. The hollows were gone. Her eyes were not haunted. They were clear. She kissed him. It was not the desperate, pleading kiss of the cabin. It was not the defiant, angry kiss of the ashes. It was slow. It was sure. It was a kiss of peace. He pulled her close, his hands gentle on her back. This was not the raw, clinging need of two broken people in the dark. This was a man and a woman. In their own home, it was raw, still, but it was radiant, lit by the fire they had built together. Later, lying on the bedroll, the fire burning down to red embers, she smiled. He touched her face, his thumb tracing the curve of her mouth. "You're smiling." She turned, pressing her face into his hand. "I am," she whispered, her voice thick with a strange, new sleepiness. I don't feel any guilt. I don't feel anything but warm." She closed her eyes. And for the first time, she smiled without pain. The spring came to the high valley. The last of the snows melted, and the meadow exploded in a riot of blue and yellow wildflowers. Jessie was leaning on the new fence he had built for the horses, who were fat and content on the rich grass. He was watching the cabin. The door opened. Anne, who was no longer silent, ran out. She was laughing, a high, clear sound that Jessie had never heard before. She was chasing a butterfly, her small legs pumping, the blue ribbon flashing in her hair. Clara came out and stood on the small porch. She was not wearing rags. She wore a simple dress of blue cotton. Her hair, which she had cut, was unbound, and it shone in the bright morning sun. She stood for a moment, her face turned up to the light, just breathing. She looked at Jessie and smiled, a real, easy smile. She walked over to him, leaning on the fence beside him. He watched her, this woman he had pulled from the dark. He looked at her face, her unbound hair, her clear eyes. He looked at their daughter, laughing in the field. He looked at the cabin, with the word hope carved over the door. He put his arm around her, pulling her close. She leaned against him, a perfect fit. He looked out at the valley, at the new life they had built from ash and iron. He let out a long, slow breath, and a small smile touched his own lips. "We survived," he whispered. "Thank you for listening to this story. We would love to hear from you. Please comment and let us know where in the world you are listening from. Be sure to subscribe to From Wild West for more stories like this one, and share your thoughts in English.